Sir, you look terrible.
No, I look retired.
Retired. You really believe that?
First of all, Erica, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day as we celebrate the 10th anniversary of John Wick. I cannot believe it's been 10 years, but John Wick is one of the most incredible film franchises out there. It set the bar for a whole new set of action rules and action for the action genre. Look, in 10 years, we've had 4 movies, a TV show, and a spin-off movie in the line. When you first were making John Wick, how much of the future was the ending planned out?
None. I mean, I think, when we were making the first movie, we did it independently. The movie fell apart like 10 times financially. The check did not clear. And, Chad and David never directed main unit before. They never directed together. So there was so many factors. We had no distribution. So just sort of like making it to the finish line of John Wick was a feat in itself. And then, to be honest, we didn't really know what we had. I remember screening it for buyers and almost all the distributors walked out. So I think we certainly had no idea until later in the process. Lionsgate ended up buying the movie for domestic distribution. We showed it to them in July. They were like, oh, we have no Saw coming out this year. Let's put it out in October. Kind of, arbitrary decisions. And then the movie came out. We showed the movie at Fantastic Fest. And Harry Knowles tweeted, like, this is what action movies should be. And the reaction was really great. And so we knew that people were sort of like leaning into it. But yeah, the funny thing is like the first movie did well, but not so well, right? It was really in its afterlife, like VOD and everything, that it made a ton of money, that all of a sudden we were like, oh my gosh, we have the luxury of making a sequel, and we sort of had no idea. We never saw that coming. We had no plan.
Wait,
it was
so
wild.
If it weren't for a Saw movie coming out, we may not even have had a John Wick.
I think they would have bought it. I'm not sure they would have put it out so fast because, there was really no like time for long lead marketing or really with that kind of a turnaround.
That's incredible to me. That's so crazy. Now, what's your fondest memory looking back on where John Wick began? And on the flip side, what was the least fond memory or biggest challenge crafting the first John Wick film?
The first movie was, to answer the second part first, very difficult to shoot. Like I said, the money fell apart. We had like literally checks that weren't clearing. And so the movie went down, shut down, and, Basil was paying for wardrobe on his credit card, and we were sort of like piecing it together. And then, like all movies, you never have enough time or days. And it was a very tight shoot, and we were trying to accomplish a lot. And we were running around New York, and which just has its own challenges. And so there are so many like very dark moments of shooting John Wick 1. I do remember there's also a lot of, Chad and Dave did this one movie together and they never directed again. So it was kind of like, there was a lot of spirited discussions and disagreements while we were shooting the movie outside of, general sort of like not getting along with crew members or whatever else happens on any movie set. But it was very hard. I remember walking home from set many nights, and I was young and crying and thinking, this is insane. This movie is so difficult that I don't know how we'll ever survive. I mean, the best parts, there's so many fun parts, but I mean, truly, like, I remember the day that we shot the dead dog, and it was, we used this like, stuffed animal of the dog, and we're rolling, and you just see Keanu holding this stuffed dog and crying, and you're sort of like, I don't know if this is the worst thing we've ever shot or the best thing we've ever shot. Like I had lost the plot. So I think there's like a lot of moments like that along the way. There's a funny story where we were shooting at the Brooklyn Navy Yards, and we were using a lot of, there's a lot of loud noises, and the police were called, and we were on the cover of the newspaper the next morning, Keanu with a gun, because so many of the locals had called thinking there was like an actual attack. So just like things like that were always like wild and There's so many crazy stories in John Wick, especially over like the four movies. But one was hard, and two was hard. Additionally, because we were sort of back at it, but in a different way. It was Chad on his own, so it was almost like making a movie for the first time with him as a filmmaker. So that presented its own challenges. I mean, each movie presents its own challenges, obviously, as we get bigger and traverse continents and countries and all of that. Challenges.
Chad also mentioned the dead dog scene being the one that he didn't know was going to work or not also. So that's interesting that both of you guys said that. It feels like,
even like Michael Nyquist, there's this famous scene in the movie where he gets a call, Alfie calls him and he's like, you fucked with the wrong guy. Sorry, I'm not sure if I can curse, but
you're good.
And he goes, oh, and when we shot that scene, we're like, when we tested that, everyone laughed in the movie. And so there's it's hard to, when you're shooting the movies, I guess any movie, to know what's going to work and what's going to not. But those were a few that I was like, really, really dubious.
Right. Feel like if you can make it through a John Wick movie, you can make any movie in Hollywood at this point. Now, John Wick's name is now up there with other characters like Jason Bourne, Jack Bauer, and James Bond. What does that mean to you? And what went behind what was the original went behind the original name John Wick, and how did that become the title instead of Scorn? Okay,
so I mean, obviously those are iconic characters, and I think that we're so lucky to be in that category. The funny story is, yes, it was a spec script that Derek Kolstad wrote. I read. It really, and loved. And then, but the script at the time was written for a much older man. Scorn felt sort of like a bad horror movie. And so the story is that we collected all the interns and said, we can't call this movie Scorn. We're going to do an internal Thunder Road pool. Whoever comes up with the best title wins lunch. No one came up with anything. Basil was like, why don't we just call it John Wick? That's the name of the lead character. And the meaning behind John Wick is that Derek Kolstad's, I believe, grandfather's name in real life is John Wick. So arbitrary decisions that are now cemented in pop culture.
I love that. That's so cool. Now, are there any characters or actors from the first movie that you wish you could bring back or regret killing or tried to bring back but couldn't make work?
I would love Willem Dafoe as Marcus is, Willem is just like the best guy ever, and such a great actor that I would have loved to be able to bring him back. Sure. That's a good question. We killed Common in a way that I feel like we've debated if we could bring him back or not, and sort of, and look how we left John Wick 4. I think we could, we could bring John Wick back.
I hope so.
Yeah, it would be fun to work with a lot of the people from the first movie. Obviously Michael Nyquist is not with us anymore, so that was unfortunate. And we've had so many great actors over the years, though. We've been really lucky to bring, Ian and Lance. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, back for a lot, time and time again, and Fishburne. And look, we were able to shoot the movies, the first two and most of the third in New York. So there was a great wealth of people that wanted to come play with us. Hallie, now we sort of get incoming calls a little bit because people are like, I want to be in the John Wick movies, which is super fun too.
That's incredible. Now, watching the lore expand with the sequel movies has been really interesting to me. What were some of the original ground rules for the Assassin's Guild, like the Continental and all that, and how much is a gold coin actually worth?
That's a great question. The gold coin, I don't think we ever put a monetary, allotment to it. I think it was more just like, if you if you had one, it was like the golden ticket in. And it is funny because it does buy you sort of different things within different movies, but it's more like, we never assigned. We should do that though. If we make John Wick 5, like we should definitely do. We always love the idea that the gold coins were made like, in like Switzerland, or sure, gold melted in these vaults, and we've created a lot of lore. But what's fun about the Continentals, we always get asked. We leave so much untold, and so the gold coins, everyone loves like the lore of that. So it was fun in the Continental to kind of come up with the idea of the coin press as, answering sort of one of the questions.
I love that. I love that. Now, you said that on the first John Wick, sometimes you went home crying. If you could go back and give yourself advice before working on John Wick, what would it be?
That is also a good question. I think going into any movie, you always go in with great expectations, and it's a crazy business and a crazy job, the Wild West, where every day is different. I think I just I'm far more thick-skinned now. I think 10 years and lots of movies outside the John Wick movie have taught me that, you wake up the next day, it's a new day, new challenges, new adventures, and you just gotta roll with it.
Speaking of that, I just off subject real quick. I just saw one of your movies, Trigger Warning, and I absolutely loved it. Just to let
thank you.
It's incredible. But the John Wick movies raised the bar for the action genre and have been hugely influential. How do you feel about the movie or franchise's impact on the industry as a whole?
I mean, it's completely changed, I think, the action game. But right before John Wick came out, I don't know, the action was a bit. Everything was kind of the same.
Sure.
And I think that, we came out and we had this, Keanu, you could tell, was doing the stunts, and we didn't cut, and these long takes and gun fu and car fu and killing people with small objects, and using the environment to create sequences was, I think, we were a lot of the first people to do that. I mean, the question I get most asked in this business is, from other buyers or studios or, producers, we want our John Wick. And I think, look, we tapped into magic in a bottle, no doubt. And, Keanu is the perfect casting and is sort of like embodies John Wick. And it just hit this moment where I think audiences were excited for something new. And look, I get to play in the action arena, and Trigger Warning is a good example of that, right? Like, so on Trigger Warning, it was like, well, can we do, a mostly female action movie? It was female producers, female director, female DP. Obviously, Jessica Alba was an amazing star and partner in that, had done action in the past, but hadn't done it in a while. So, so for me, it's just, it's fun, and it's great to kind of see what else, how much further we can push action and the genre every day.
Absolutely. Now, Keanu Reeves, can you talk about how his approach to the character has changed over the past decade?
It's a good question. I mean, he still consistently trains and is, takes the role so seriously and is the most committed actor and the best partner we could have ever asked for. He's deeply involved from script level. Right. Whereas the first one, we gave him a script and he certainly put his DNA on it, but now he is much more involved from, idea from day one, page one. And so many of his ideas become part of the movie and part of the world. Like, he came up with the idea of the markers. And so I think he's the most invested actor I've ever worked with. It's impressive. But he's consistent over all the movies. He is a true, an amazing partner, a great actor who's so prepared, is up for anything, and he gives it his all. So that's consistent.
That's incredible. Now, looking back in the last 10 years, what's the craziest / coolest / best stunt or fight sequence from the franchise? And what was the thing you couldn't believe you pulled off?
Oh, man. That's a hard question. I think it's preference, probably. I mean, shooting in France was very challenging, I think. And also shooting the dog Halle Berry sequence in Morocco, I think, was one of the more challenging ones. I mean, there's always like logistics, horses in New York and the permits. And so every movie has like its own really specific thing. But when we shot in Morocco, it was super challenging because when we got there, a lot of the locations we had wanted to use were unavailable. And one funny anecdote is where we shot that shootout, that sequence, with the dogs was in a tiny fishing village. So there were fish everywhere, and then there were cats everywhere. And the dogs, who we've been shipped in from the US and Canada, there's 4 dogs. 2 by the time they made it to Morocco just didn't like Morocco and didn't want to perform. And then there was cats everywhere and dead fish everywhere, and the dogs were like getting very distracted. So we had to build this cat hotel on the side of the set, and we were constantly like wrangling the cats. And I just remember our call time that day was like 2:30 in the morning. I mean, Hallie was a true champion. We had pushed the shoot because she had broken her ribs. It was just sort of mayhem in general. That was one of the more challenging kind of sections. But I mean, there's honestly so many. I mean, the Arc de Triomphe was challenging, the resets and the permitting in New York and specifically in France at Sacré-Cœur, and some of the locations we were trying to get were just really hard.
I can imagine. I used to be a production manager, so I can only imagine the hell that you guys were going through. Yeah. Are there any stunts that you attempted that you didn't or couldn't pull off in the films?
I mean, some things didn't come out as good as we wanted them to be. I think, what's interesting is the motorcycle sequence in 3 with the swords. It's not that it didn't come out the way that we wanted. I think it's a very visual effect heavy sequence, which is not typically what we do. And I think that we struggled sort of fitting that into the movie and having it work the way that some of the other sequences did. But of course, I mean, the dogs was a parkour up, sides of walls, like that didn't always work the way it was supposed to. Lots of things, little things along the way.
Speaking of animals have been a part of the story and motivation throughout the series. Can you talk about the motivations that goes into the animal action sequences in some of the films, like the dogs in part 3 or the horses in part 2?
The motivation as the idea, or the
idea, yeah.
So, I mean, I think, we love animals. I think, Chad has dogs. I read the first script and I still have like the email on my desk that was like, I'm not, the villain is thin and there's lots of things wrong with this, but I love I love my dog, and I think this is so cool. The horses were an idea. I think it was Keanu's or Chad's, I don't remember, who was like, wouldn't it be so cool just to have a sequence to have a horse kick, to have, we're always trying to like, what if, push the envelope. And obviously, Chad is deeply influenced by, Japanese samurai movies and Westerns, which I think, cowboy culture, the horses just fit sort of seamlessly in that. We're always figuring out how to like go from point A to point B, and the horses were like a great example of that. I think the dogs, it's funny, in 4, we wanted to find a way to use the dog. And so we gave the tracker a dog, which I think was an interesting way to fit that into that storyline. So sometimes it's not so organic, it's a bit contrived, but we just like love the idea of animals and how to like push to use them even further.
Love that. Now that we've had 10 years and things are about to expand with the ballerina and other projects in development, what do you want to see for the next 10 years of John Wick to like look like?
It's a great question. I mean, obviously I'd love more spinoffs and TV shows and exploring all different arenas. I think, first and foremost, I love John Wick 5 and figuring out what that movie looks like and what the story is and, how we take the franchise to the next level. I think, we set this bar so high in 4 and we kind of left it all on the table. I say we like burn the house down when we make the movie. So I think to pull it all together, it has to be a great idea and the stars have to align. And there's a lot of pressure to get that right. So it's really, I think that's what I'm most hopeful and excited and anxious about.
Interesting. Now that there's so much interest in seeing Keanu come back as John Wick for a 5th movie, do you have any regrets over ending 4 with his apparent death? And have you heard about this crazy fan rumor or fan theory, I should say, that the IP starts leaning towards supernatural and it's having John Wick fight his way out of hell.
I have not heard that IP. I mean, I have not heard that rumor. That feels less likely to me.
It feels a little less likely.
Going supernatural.
Right.
I don't know if I love that idea personally. I think, there's thematics and allegories of hell. I think, there's consequences and a lot of, Chad always says that these movies are like, Greek mythology. So I think that there's a lot of sort of similarities in the way that we could execute things like that, but I don't think true supernatural. I am, is he dead? I don't, I think that that's subjective. Maybe there's nothing in that grave. I'm a producer, so I think, we're hopeful for more.
Me too. All right, the last question I have for you is, what have you learned about yourself through the last 10 years working on these films?
That's a great question. As a person, I've evolved immensely. I've sort of, I've had 2 daughters making these movies. I did John Wick 3 with a 6-week-old, and I did John Wick 4 pregnant. Oh. So I think really having tested my my strength and my endurance and my sanity, look, I've learned so much. I've grown so much. These movies are a gift. Many people would love to have one movie like John Wick in their repertoire, and I am blessed to have 4 and Ballerina and spinoffs. And so I am not naive to know that franchises are 1 in a million, and one that touches people so deeply, and that each movie gets bigger and better, and the reviews and the box office and all of that is escalating, is once in a lifetime. And so I take that really seriously. As a human, I mean, they have been the hardest movies and have given me the most satisfaction and adulation, and have reached the most people. So, it's been an amazing run, and I'm hopeful and grateful for more.
Well, look, thank you so much for your time. And also thank you for working on these films, because the John Wick is one of my favorite franchises out there. And yes, I absolutely want a 5th one with Keanu returning. But Erica, thank you so much for being gracious with your time. I appreciate it.
Of course. Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
How you holding up?
I keep asking why her.
There's no rhyme or reason to this life. It's days like today scattered among the rest.